that you have while I'm talking. That's completely fine with me. So thanks, Tiara and Black DVM, for having me on here to talk about what we do in bringing animals into the United States. As an intro, I am a veterinarian that works with the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, veterinary services, which is under the USDA. And what we do is work with other countries to bring in healthy animals into the United States. That being said, there are a lot of things that go into play when we're looking at bringing any type of animal, whether that's a horse, a dog, a cat, even our zoo animals or exotic species. There's a lot that goes into play in making sure those animals come in safely, but also that they're coming in and not bringing any kind of disease with them, because we don't want to bring in diseases from other countries that we don't have in the United States. So it's our job to make sure that we are doing that by working with the country they're coming from, looking at their animal health status and checking them at our borders and at the ports which they come in. So I mainly work with horses, but this can go for any species that we take in. Regarding horses, we, on an annual basis, bring in close to 24,000 horses a year. I don't think anybody is kind of aware of how many horses we actually bring into the United States every year, but it is pretty significant amount of horses. These horses come in for competition purposes, like the annual Breeders' Cup or the World Equestrian Games. There's a lot of festivals and competitions that go on throughout the year in the United States. That being said, we get horses from all over the world, from our European Union countries, so the Netherlands and France. We get horses from Japan, Korea, you name it, we get it. But in looking at those countries, we have to make sure and look at their animal health status. So for countries that are maybe affected with pyroplasmosis or affected with glanders or affected with contagious equine metritis, all of those diseases are diseases we do not want in the United States, because we are classified as free of those diseases. And those are just a few of diseases. Each commodity or each species you could think of, we have a set of diseases that we are particularly looking for in the animals coming into our country, because we don't have those diseases. And so we want to make sure any animal coming in doesn't bring those diseases and harms or exposes our domestic population. So we talk about the animal health status of our countries. Based on that animal health status, we then see, is this going to be a significant risk to bring this horse in or this animal in? Or are there things that we can put in place to make sure to decrease that risk? So that means putting import requirements in place. So a lot of horses, they have to complete quarantine once they arrive to the United States. For some countries, that's a 3-day quarantine. Other countries, that's a 7-day quarantine. And we have countries where they have to complete a 60-day quarantine. During that time, they're also tested for diseases, specific diseases of concern to us that, once again, we don't have in the United States. And only after they complete their quarantine, after they get tested and are negative, then they can be allowed into the United States. We have veterinary medical officers, so veterinarians that work with veterinary services at all of our ports of entry. So they are checking all of the animals that come in, whether that's via our southern border ports, which is the border from US and Mexico, or our northern border port, which is the border between the US and Canada, or coming in through our airports. We have several ports throughout the country, in New York, Miami, LA, Chicago, Puerto Rico. We have a variety of ports that horses come into all the time. We have veterinarians that work there to make sure that they're checking those animals the way they should be, and that they're not coming in with any kind of disease or any kind of wounds or open wounds or clinical signs of illness. So it takes a lot into bringing animals in. The other side of that is writing those import requirements and protocols for animals to come from different countries. And that's where I come in. So I work with staff that we write the policy and the guidelines for animals, in my case, horses coming from other countries. We work with those countries to look at their animal health status and then base our import requirements based on that, putting things in place to mitigate the potential disease risk exposure for those animals coming in. So we're in daily contact with a variety of countries, making sure they are aware of our requirements and that the horses they are sending us are meeting our requirements at all times. We do this primarily through health certifications. Each horse or each animal coming in must come with a health certificate that outlines where they've been for the past 60 days, what diseases they may have been exposed to during that time or have not been exposed to, and that they are presenting healthy. And all of the countries must certify to those health certificate requirements. And we hold those countries accountable when any animal comes in that are not meeting those standards and certifications that the countries have attested to. And that's when we go back to the drawing board with that country and start having those conversations as to why they may have certified a horse or animal being healthy that we now get that is not healthy, that doesn't meet our requirements. So a lot goes into play on a daily basis into making sure that animals come in healthy and safe as possible across the board. I think that was like a very general but direct overview of kind of what it takes to bring any animal into the US. We have a great relationship with our Canadian counterparts and our Mexico counterparts. They are our neighboring countries, so we do a lot with them on a daily basis for all commodities. So we have regular discussions with them regarding our import requirements on both sides of the table to make sure that everybody is aware and connected to our procedures. When things don't go right or when shipments are held at our ports of entry because they don't meet our requirements, we go back to the countries and say, this particular shipment isn't meeting our requirements. Either you can assist that shipment and importer to meet our requirements, or we refuse entry and those animals have to return back to the country they came from. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen because once again, we want to make sure that all the animals we release into the United States are meeting our standards for import and are not posing a significant risk of disease to our domestic population. That is our mission, and we take that very seriously in making sure that each shipment is upholding those standards. And when they don't, they can't be released until they're due, or they have to be returned back to the country of origin. So I believe that is it. I know that was kind of quick, but I wanted to leave most of the time to answer questions because I know not everybody is familiar the valuable work that veterinarians do with the government, not just with APHIS, but in any part of the government. We have veterinarians that work in several different agencies under the USDA. APHIS is one of them. I would say we're the best agency, but there are a lot of other agencies where veterinarians are very valuable and do great work working for the government. So I wanted to leave a lot of time to answer any questions you all might have about working for the government as a veterinarian or even as a veterinary technician. We have those as well that work in the field at our ports of entry, inspecting animals alongside our veterinarians, or in the field as an animal health technician, working in disease surveillance under our domestic programs. So with that being said, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so feel free to unmute yourself. I think I saw in the chat that Victoria, Corinne, and Myra are all together on Victoria's Zoom. So if you guys have any questions, I think Amber, you know Corinne. She is Salty Wilson. Yep, from.
Hi, Corinne.
Hello, and how do you? So I do have a question. It's a very specific question. Might be a
okay, cool.
So how do you guys do like risk assessments when you guys are, I guess, taking horses in to the U.S.?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we have a unit that they're called the Regional Evaluation Service. Um, and so they handle most of our risk assessments. However, horses are different, and we do our own risk assessments for countries. So what that looks like is, let's say, um, we have a country that wants to renegotiate their status for a particular disease, let's say for CEM, right? So any country that's we designate as being CEM affected, they have additional requirements they have to meet because they are designated as a CEM country. But if a country puts in a request, which they can, to say we are no longer affected with CEM, we first send them. It's a questionnaire. It's a pretty extensive questionnaire where they have to provide us information about their whole veterinary structure of their entire country. And so we look at that information in detail, and they must provide detailed information. Um, so that is the first portion of that, is looking at their written documentation. After that, then there's an on-site inspection to make sure everything they said in writing is actually what's happening. Because a lot of times, people will say stuff, but it may not be the case in reality. So we want to make sure anytime that we are changing the status of a country or looking at the status of a country, that we're doing it appropriately. So a lot of times that risk assessment can take years. Like we still have countries that have requested a disease status change for, since 3 years ago. And we're still working through that process. So it can take a long time. So that is one way. Another way is, so I'm not sure you all are aware, but Thailand and Malaysia earlier this year was recategorized as being African horse sickness affected as a country because they had outbreaks of those diseases, of that particular disease in their country. And African horse sickness is one of the diseases that is required to be reported to the OIE, which is a National Animal Health Association, pretty much. And once we see the OIE reports and we get reports ourselves from those countries, then until we can do a further evaluation of their status, they automatically get put on that list as being African horse sickness affected because of the how the disease is transmitted so quickly, and it is vector borne, and it can go from horse to horse so rapidly. They automatically then get recognized as an African horse sickness region. Now, once you get put on a list like that, it takes a lot for you to get off that list. So if if Thailand or Malaysia ever get to the point where they want to come off of that list, they will then have to go through that whole process I just mentioned of the questionnaire and then a site visit for them to come off. Because that is a very serious disease that we definitely do not want in the United States at all, ever. So that would be one where they would have to detail everything they have done to clear up the outbreak and to ensure there would be no future outbreaks.
Oh wow, thank you. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a long process.
I have another. Oh, go ahead. Have you worked in any other area of the public sector?
I'm sorry, you're really.
Have you worked in any other areas of the public sector, or is APHIS BS just the only one?
That is so APHIS. I've been with APHIS since I graduated vet school. I found out about APHIS in undergrad, and once I found out about it through a career fair, I fell in love with APHIS. So I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. And so I've been with APHIS ever since undergrad as an intern and all through vet school. I've served in different positions within veterinary services, but still with the same agency.
Okay.
It's a great agency to work for. So if you're interested, I definitely say go for it.
What were the other positions that you worked for?
Yeah. So when I first graduated vet school, I was under contract with APHIS veterinary services. And so they sent me to Texas to work at the border of Mexico. And so at that point, I didn't even really know that we expected cattle at the border of Mexico. I was like, what? I didn't even know this existed. It was in the middle of nowhere at first, but that actually ended up being like my favorite position. And I really think that helped me get to where I am now. I still talk to the people there. It was a different culture, but I learned how to, move my way around, and so it was cool. I even visited Mexico, just by walking across the border a couple times. So that was kind of cool. Um, let's see. So I did that, and then I was a field veterinary medical officer in Virginia. So our field veterinary medical officers, they work with our domestic programs. So we have a program for EIA, where we work with our labs, and a lot of times we'll work with our cell barns and like our slaughter plants to collect certain samples or to make sure the animals going through our cell barns are being ID'd appropriately. So I did that. I worked a lot with swine when I was in the field. I covered the whole part of the southeast part of Virginia. So it was a lot of traveling, but I enjoyed it. You got your own truck and just kind of do what you want to do. You make up your own schedule. As long as you get your work done, like you can do what you want to do in your work day to make it fun and to find different things and work with different farmers. So that was pretty cool. So Virginia, and then now in my current position, I write the policy for horses coming into the United States in Maryland. That's where my duty station is. And then starting in October 25th, so the end of October, I will transition into another position, being the director of live animal exports.
Wow. Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about that. It's something different. But yeah, I think it'd be pretty cool.
I had a question about the risk assessment. If you need to go, who goes to check out the facilities? Do you guys go in?
We
Or
do.
oh,
Uh, yeah, so we are the ones that would go as being the lead of that. We do have people that work for APHIS in different countries. So they would also assist us in that, which is cool because if you're interested in like working internationally, there is a component of APHIS that works internationally. We have personnel in like 28 plus countries. So they are always assisting us and working with our trading partners. But in regards to the risk assessments, yes, you will be able to travel and be a part of that and leading that team to do the on-site inspection.
okay. I have another question.
Yeah.
So, for your time at the southern border post, what part of Texas were you
So
stationed?
I was in Eagle Pass, Texas. It's like about 2 hours, let me see, I think southeast from um, Laredo. That's right. And about 7 hours away from El Paso. The closest city that was like big, per se, was San Antonio, and that was 2 hours north. Um, so that was interesting, and took some time to get used to. The town, it had everything you needed, but not really anything outside of what you really needed per se. So, so you did have to travel to get to things like that, like to San Antonio, since that was the biggest city. But I mean, you had a little shopping center, you had a Walmart. If you got Walmart, you can make it. So you had some good restaurants. So it was pretty decent.
Okay, cool. Can you elaborate a little bit more on like some of the work you got to do while you were at the port?
Absolutely. So actually covered Eagle Pass, Texas, and then for like a 6-month stint, I had to cover another port as well that was about an hour away. Um, so I worked with cattle and horses primarily. We also helped we call them the cattle fever tech program. We also helped them when they had outbreaks. Um, we put on trainings for our Mexico counterparts so they could learn what we do. They would come across the border, and we would give them trainings and do it on site, on hands training so they could see and they could learn from us so they could then better their practices on the Mexico side of the border. Um, so yeah, I think occasionally we would have to do facility inspections to help out, but those are like kind of rare in between doing facility inspections. But yeah, we were seeing in our busy season, which at my port was around the Christmas season because Mexico closes for 2 weeks. So everybody would try to push their animals in before Mexico closed down. So like the month before the 2 week period, we were crossing like 900 head of cattle a day. So that's a lot of cattle to be looking at for one day, but you get used to it and you get used to the pace of things. Yeah, and it actually was really enjoyable.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yep.
Oh, another question. When you were field demo in Virginia, were you first 40 for schedule? Or
Can you repeat that?
oh, I'm sorry. When you were a field VMO in Virginia, was your schedule like the first 40 type hours in the week, and then you could do whatever you wanted the rest of the week?
Yeah, it was. That's the good thing about being a field VMO. So your day, because you work out of your house is your duty station. Your day starts when you need it to start, um, whether that's doing computer work at your house or jumping in the truck and going wherever you need to go. So yeah, if you got your job done, in the first 4 days, then yeah, you would be able to take the rest of the time off. Because some days you did have long days where you had to work 10 to 12 hours to get your stuff done, or because you were driving far. So you can adjust your schedule however you need to make sure that you have your 40 hours and you're not going over your 40 hours.
Cool, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I have another question. What
Okay.
is it, since you've been with APHIS since undergrad, what do you love about it that made you stay?
The versatility. I've been able to be in a few different positions, and even as a student, um, I was able to be exposed to different aspects of the agency and working with different people. And in every position that I've had, no day is the same. Um, Things are always different and always changing, which makes it very interesting most days. And I think that's what I like about it. If I ever get, too comfortable, I guess for me, I know there's something I can always do that is completely different, but still be within the same agency. And I think that is just an awesome aspect of working for APHIS in general. Is there's just so much you can do, so many different um, ways you can do your job as a veterinarian. I'm not much into research, so I would never work in a lab, but that option is there. Um, so whatever your interests are as a veterinarian, you can find a job and position within APHIS to do that. Um, and I think that's what will keep me here, is that I won't ever get bored. Even if I'm in one position, I know I can